Hello, and welcome to Getting Started with Azure. My name's Sam Cogan. I'm an Azure MVP and a cloud architect. And in this series, I'm going to be taking you through the steps to get up and running with Microsoft's cloud platform, Azure. So whether you're brand new to the cloud or coming to Azure from another cloud provider like AWS or Google, this is the series for you to get up to speed with Azure. In today's episode, we're going to cover the very first things you need to do to get access to Azure and start using it. So we're going to cover creating an account and a subscription, accessing the Azure portal, getting access to command line tools, and then a few other tools that can help with your Azure experience. Once you complete today's tutorial, you'll have everything you need to get started building services in Azure and to follow along with the next video tutorials where we'll be looking at things like Azure Web Apps, Azure SQL, and virtual machines. So let's get started. The first thing you're going to need to be able to actually do any work with Azure is an account. You might already have one of these through school or work, and if you want to use that, that's fine. But if you don't, the other option is to sign up for what's called an Azure free account, and that's what we're going to be using for this series. You can sign up for the free account online. Just search for Azure Free or go to the link we'll put in the show notes below. The free account gives you a few different benefits, as you can see listed on this page here. The first one is some credit on Azure, so £150 or $200 if you're in the US. This credit lasts 30 days, but it can be used against any Azure service you want to try out. That's useful, but in my opinion, the best part of this free account is the next one, which is 12 months of popular services for free. So you get access to a number of what would normally be paid for Azure services for no cost for the first year of using your free account. So that includes one Linux virtual machine, one Windows virtual machine, some managed disks to go with those virtual machines, some blob storage, some file storage, SQL database, Cosmos DB, and some networking bandwidth. So those are all pretty nice to be able to actually get started with trying out Azure. Obviously, none of these things are going to be enough to actually run a full commercial service on them, but it's a great way of just trying out Azure and playing about with some things on a small scale. Finally, if we scroll back up, the last benefit is these always free services. So this is not specific to the free account. These are services that are in Azure that are free for everyone all the time. But these obviously are available as part of the free account as well. So we're going to go ahead and click on Start for Free and sign up for our free Azure account. A couple of things you need to bear in mind here. You are going to need a Microsoft ID or what was formerly a Live ID to actually sign up for this service. It's also only available to accounts that have never used Azure before. So the account you're signing up with needs to not have used Azure free account before or in fact used any sort of Azure subscription before. Otherwise it won't let you sign up. We'll go ahead and log in with our Live account. And this is going to take us to a page where we need to fill in some details. So using the usual things, first name, last name, email address, phone number. You're also going to have to supply a phone number for them to verify your identity and a credit or debit card. This card is used for verifying your identity and preventing fraud. It's not used for charging you. So once you create your subscription, you'll see that actually there is a limit on the subscription that prevents you from using any resources that go above your free limit. So there's no chance of you being charged. So once you put all that in, complete the agreement and click submit. That will then take a few minutes to actually create your subscription. Once it does, it'll take you through to this Welcome to Azure page. You can complete that with some of your information if you want, and then you can either submit or click skip, and that will take you straight through to the Azure portal. The Azure portal is the graphical interface for managing and controlling your Azure resources. The first time you log in, you'll get this window you can see here asking about whether or not you want to undertake the tour. Feel free to click Start Tour and it'll give you a brief introduction to the portal. We're going to skip that for now. You can always get it back later if you want by going to the help icon and then clicking on the launch guided tour option. Inside the portal on the left, you've got a list of applications you can access. The ones displayed here are the most common ones. You can access others as well by clicking on More Services down at the bottom. On the right-hand side, taking up most of the window, is the dashboard. This is used to provide quick access to certain Azure resources, and you can also display things like monitoring graphs, alerts, those sort of things onto a dashboard. We'll cover that in a future video, but this can be fully customized to display whatever you want about your Azure resources, really. If we click on the left on the All Resources button, you can quickly see we haven't got anything deployed into this subscription yet, and we'll start filling that up in the next few videos. And at the top left, we have the New button. This is where we can actually go ahead and create some services. And this will take you to an interface where you can pick the type of service you want, you can search for services, or you can pick from popular services. And then it'll start the wizard that will walk you through creating these. The displays in the portal work on what's called a blade system. So each time you click on an icon or a resource, it will display a certain blade with all the information you want on it. You might then click on another option which will display a further blade and so on, expanding horizontally. Along the top of the portal, we've got a search bar that you can search for specific resources by name, the notifications section that will show you any alerts or notifications about your resources, the Cloud Shell icon, which we'll talk about shortly. The portal settings window, which allows you to change this color scheme, the contrast, and so on. Feedback, and the help and support section. That covers the portal at a very high level, and we'll be digging into more of the resources in there in future videos. But I would encourage you just to have a play around inside the portal, have a look at some of the resources, even create some if you want. Remember, you've got that £150 credit that lasts you 30 days, so you can use that up on any of the resources that are available in Azure. So the portal is one way of interacting with Azure, and if you're a fan of graphical interfaces, it might be the main way you do all of your work inside the portal. But there are other ways to interact with your Azure resources as well. One of the popular ones is through command line. There are two primary methods for getting command line access to Azure. The first is through the Azure Powershell commandlets. The other option is the Azure Command Line, or CLI. This is a cross-platform command line tool that works on Windows, Linux, and Mac. Installing the PowerShell commandlets is fairly straightforward. You can either use PowerShell get and just use the install module command to have it pulled directly through PowerShell, or if you don't have that available to you, you can also download the MSI, which is available directly from GitHub, and run that installer, which will install those components for you as well. We'll take the simple route here and use PowerShell get, so I'll bring up a command line interface, and I'll just run install module -azure rm, and then I'll put the allow clobber flag on the end. What that does is basically allow the installation to override any existing modules there, and always make sure you have the latest version of Azure RM installed. So we'll run that. That'll take a little while to run through and download all of the components, and once that's done, we will have the tools ready. My installation is completed now, so I want to just do a quick test to make sure I can connect to Azure. The first thing you need to do is log in and authenticate to the Azure platform. So we'll go ahead and run the login Azure RM account command, and this will pop a Azure AD window for us to actually authenticate to the platform. So we'll log in with the Microsoft account we used to create our subscription. Fill in those details, and that will take a second to connect to the service and authenticate us. And then we'll be back to our PowerShell commandlet, and we're now authenticated to Azure, and we can run any Azure commands we want against that. So we'll just do a quick test, and we'll use the get Azure RM subscription to list our subscriptions, and we only have one. So what should come back is our Azure free subscription. Alternatively, if you'd prefer to use the CLI, we'll go ahead and set that up now as well. So again, you can download that from the Azure pages. There's a page here, and I'll put the link in the show notes. They give you the instructions for installing on various different operating systems. We're going to install on Windows. And you can see there are actually two options for Windows. We can install it with the MSI, or if you're using with the bash tools for Ubuntu on Windows, you can install it inside there as well. We're just going to do the MSI, so we'll download that and run the MSI to install it. I've got the CLI installed and running now. So again, the first thing I need to do is actually log into the Azure platform. So we'll run the AZ login command. You'll notice that all of the CLI commands start with AZ, indicating it's an Azure command. So if we run login, this is slightly different to the way we did it with PowerShell. So rather than presenting us with a box where we can type a username and password, this uses the device login tools for Azure. So it will provide us with a URL and a code. We need to go to that URL in our browser and enter the code, and that will authenticate us with the service. Now we're logged in, same as we did with PowerShell, we're going to go ahead and just query our subscription list. So we'll run the az account list command, and that will provide us, again, the list of our one subscription so that we can verify that we can actually connect to Azure. So that's both of the command line tools, but there is actually another way to run both of these, which might be useful. Rather than installing them onto your desktop machine, you can instead run them right inside the Azure portal using the Azure Cloud Shell. What the Cloud Shell is an instance of either the CLI or PowerShell now. PowerShell's in preview, running right inside your browser that you can access just when you're inside the portal. So if we hop back to the portal web interface, and you'll remember when we looked at that, along the top we had these options, one of which is this Cloud Shell window. And if we click on that, that'll bring up the Cloud Shell interface. And because this is the first time we're signing up for it, we need to actually start this up. So we need to pick whether we want to use the bash shell or the PowerShell shell, and run that. We'll go ahead and select PowerShell as the option we want to run. And the first time you do this, it's going to ask you to set up a storage account. So what it's using this storage account for is to hold any of your preferences, any files you upload, anything like that that needs to be persisted outside of your shell. Because what's actually being created here when you run the Cloud Shell is a containers being run up in the background that runs for the duration you're using it, and then when you're done, it gets torn down. So this storage account lets you persist things between those sessions. Once we hit create, it'll go off and create that storage account and then launch your Cloud Shell for you. It can take a little while to create the storage account, a couple of minutes, so we'll just skip forward. It's finished creating the storage now. It's going to run up a container behind the scenes for us to use. Again, this can take up to a minute for PowerShell. This is using a Windows container behind the scenes. This takes a bit longer than the Linux option. And once that's done, it'll then log you into the shell, so it'll automatically authenticate you because you're already logged into the portal. And it will drop you out at a command line where you can then go ahead and use the commands the same as we did before. So we'll use the get Azure RM subscription command again. I've got full tab completion in the portal, so if I just hit tab, it'll go ahead and load its autocomplete values the first time you use it, and then it'll finish my command for us. We can run that, and again, you can see they get the same results as when we ran it on our desktop. We'll go into using PowerShell and the CLI a lot more in our future videos, but for now, feel free to play around with any of the commands. There's a full reference guide to both command lines online, and just see what you can do. Finally, we'll just take a quick look at another tool which I think is pretty useful for working with Azure, and that's a tool called Azure Storage Explorer. This is another Microsoft tool. It's cross-platform, so Windows, Linux, and Mac, and it lets you connect into Azure and manage your storage accounts from a desktop tool. This is pretty useful when you want to do things like upload data or download data from storage accounts, delete data, create new folders, move data around. It's a pretty useful tool in general. You can download this from the Microsoft website, the link's below. That will download the installer, and once you've run that, you'll be able to open up Storage Explorer, and you'll be presented with a window like this. So the first thing it needs you to do is actually hook up your account. It's going to ask you to add a storage account and pick a Azure environment. Generally, you're just going to pick Azure here. There are options for other regions as well, the China, Germany, and government clouds, but we're going to stick with the Azure option. We'll click sign in, and this is then going to ask us to authenticate again to the Azure platform. So we'll log in with our Microsoft ID like we did before. And once we're logged in, it's then going to present us with a list of subscriptions. We need to pick the subscriptions we want to actually display in Storage Explorer. We only have the one here, so we'll pick our free trial, hit apply, and that will show us the storage accounts that are available under that subscription. You'll see we've already got a storage account because this is the one we created when we fired up the Cloud Shell. You remember that needed a storage account to store its persistent data. So if we expand this one, you can see under here we've got the options for blobs, files, queues, and tables. And we'll go into what they are in a future video. But at the moment, the only thing we've got in here is under the files section where we've got the Azure Files folder that was created for the Cloud Shell to use. And if we have a look inside that, we can see the PowerShell data that was created when we did that. We have the option inside Cloud Explorer to create new containers for files and shares and queues and so on. We can also browse files, upload and download files. or move, edit, or delete the files that are already in the storage account. As we start using storage more and more throughout these tutorials, you'll start to see how useful this tool can be. Okay, so in today's tutorial, we've covered getting signed up for Azure and using the free account, using the Azure portal, the command line tools, including Cloud Shell, and Azure Storage Explorer. Hopefully that's given you a really good quick overview of how to get access to Azure and start being able to play around with it. In the next tutorial, we're going to cover Azure Web Applications, and we're going to build our very first Azure service. So until then, thanks for watching. I hope this has been useful, and goodbye.